Okay, so here's the demand curve showing that at a price of $8, the consumer is willing to buy 2 units. Price at $5, the consumer is willing to buy 4 units, and so forth. And so if nothing changes, the fancy econ term is ceteris paribus. If nothing else changes, this is going to be the demand curve for this product. This is going to show how many units will be bought at each price. But when a consumer is deciding how much to spend, it depends on certain things. It depends on how much money they have. It depends on how much they like it. It depends how, if you're looking at a market demand curve, how many people there are in the market. If that number of people grows or gets smaller, that can affect the total demand. Their expectations of what might happen to the price in the future can have an impact. And then things that they like to buy with the product or instead of the product, all of these things can affect the demand for the product. These are what we consider the third factors that can actually change this demand curve. So we talked about this in the graphical reading video, things that would move you along the line, things that will shift the curve. The only thing that will move you along the line is when price changes. If the price was 8 and you were buying 2 and the price falls to 5 and now you're buying 4, you've simply moved down along the demand curve. And if the price rises, if it goes from $2 where you bought 6 up to $5 where you bought 4, then you moved up along the demand curve. So when it's the price changing, it is going to be movement along the curve. And that makes sense because this is a curve that is relating price and quantity demanded. But when it was drawn, when any demand curve comes into existence, it's assuming all these other third factors at a certain level. So if a third factor changes, then the whole demand curve will change. So that if we used to want at $5 4 units, maybe now we want 6 units. Or maybe it's decreased demand and at $5 we now only want 2 units. So the whole curve at every price will now be mapped to a new quantity demanded. And that's what we call a change in demand. When a price has the quantity demanded associated with it increase, so it was 4, now it's 6, that's an increase in demand. And when a price has a quantity demanded associated with it decrease, that's a decrease in demand. So what we want to do in this video is talk some about what these other factors are. All right, so the first one we'll talk about is the price of a substitute. A substitute is a product that you would consume instead of the one we're looking at here. So what we have to realize is we have the demand curve here, and let's say this was the demand for, let's go with peanut butter. So this picture we're looking at is peanut butter. So how many jars of peanut butter this consumer will consume at different prices. All right, so that's what we're looking at. So what can you eat instead of peanut butter? Because substitute is something you buy instead of. So I would say let's go with Nutella, the hazelnut spread. There's something else you can put on bread and do similar types of sandwiches with, so we'll say Nutella. So if Nutella, something I would eat instead of peanut butter, goes on sale, then in the Nutella market, which is another market, okay? So there is another market over here for Nutella that we're not looking at on this picture, and it has its own demand and supply curve. And so we're saying something has happened over in the Nutella market to cause the equilibrium price to fall. It could be we'll see more of this as we start playing with the two curves, but it can be a drop in demand or an increase in supply. But something has happened, cause the price of Nutella to go down. But what we want to look at is what does that mean for my market here of peanut butter? So when the substitute's price goes down, we know the law of demand says price goes down, quantity demanded of Nutella goes up. But if it's something I'm using instead of, I don't need as much peanut butter because I'm buying Nutella. So what will happen then is at every price, we're going to see this demand curve pull over to the left. It's going to decrease, is really what I should say. And so you're going to end up with this parallel shift of the demand curve. And that's what will happen when the substitutes price decreases. So think about what that would mean if the substitutes price increases. If that means Nutella gets more expensive, I'm not going to buy as much Nutella. I'm going to need more peanut butter at every price, and you would see an increase in the demand. Okay, so the next factor we want to look at is the expected future price. Okay, this is probably the trickiest one. Let me just give you a heads up on that. But what we're basically doing here with this idea is shifting our timing of consumption. So now let's go ahead and stick with the idea that we're looking at the market for peanut butter. And apparently peanut butter is just really important to my diet. So to the point where if I have an expectation, like there's a pattern to how they price the peanut butter, they tend to put it on sale at certain times. Maybe it's a summer food and, it's probably a back to school food. So let's say August, September is coming up and I just know they're going to put that peanut butter on sale. So I have this expectation, it's say June right now, and I have an expectation that the price of peanut butter will fall in a couple of months. So what does that do for my demand for peanut butter today? And that's the key question with expected future price. Your market that you're looking at here is the market for peanut butter today. You have some expectation of the future market for peanut butter where the price is going to fall. Okay, and when that price falls, you expect that you will be increasing your quantity demanded. So I know I'm going to be stocking up, let's say, in a few months. What does that do today for my demand? And so what we're going to see then is at every price, instead of wanting, say, 4 units at $5, I might only want to get 2. And let's see, what do we got here? At $2, I would buy 6 normally, but now because I know I'm going to be stocking up in a few months, I might only buy 3. So what you end up with then is a decrease in the demand curve because I expect the future price to be lower in the future. So obviously then, if I have an expectation that the future price will be higher, I'm going to buy as much as I can right now, and I'm going to increase demand right now so that I can, not have to pay and not have to buy so many when the price goes up. Okay, so the third factor is pretty straightforward. This is the demand for peanut butter. We'll pretend that this isn't just my personal demand, but this is a market demand. It's based on there being a certain amount of people. When there's this many people at $5, people are willing to buy 4 units. If you double the number of people and they all kind of feel the same way about peanut butter, it's reasonable to think that they'll buy twice as much peanut butter. So as population goes up, the demand will increase. As population decreases, demand will decrease. Demographics is simply a subset of the population. So you could be given a problem where you're told that there's a new baby boom, so a lot of children are being born, and the demand you're looking at is the demand for bouncy castles that people use at birthday parties. So if there was a lot more babies being born, like that's a new change in the demographics, then you would expect that the demand for bouncy castles would go up as well. The next one is tastes and preferences. This is based on the idea that consumers have some preference, a taste for a particular product. If we again go with peanut butter, the reason that they are buying 4 units at $5 is that's what satisfies their taste and preferences for peanut butter. Things can change, and they can have a significant change in your taste or preferences. The cliche example we use is they discover that peanut butter causes cancer. So all of a sudden, nobody wants to eat peanut butter. And so you would see that at every price, there would be a definite decrease in the number of jars of peanut butter sold. So at every price, you would see a decrease in the quantity demanded, and you would get the shift in the demand curve, a decrease in demand. And of course, you could always have a positive change. They discover it's a cure for cancer, or it helps you lose weight, and suddenly there's a significant increase in the demand for peanut butter. Gluten-free is a big thing these days, and so that's been a real change in the consumer's taste and preferences for things that have gluten. In general, been a decrease in demand for things that have gluten. The fifth factor we're going to look at that has an impact on shifting demand is income. With income, when this demand curve, as we see it here, was drawn, it was based on the consumers having a certain income. And if things improved economy-wide, and there's a general, say, 10% increase in income, we would think then that people would buy more stuff. So in the case of peanut butter, we would expect that the $5, which has been associated with 4, would now be associated with 6, and the $7 would be associated with some other higher quantity, and so you end up with an increase in the demand curve when income increases. I got to put a little asterisk here. There's something called normal goods and inferior goods. And those aren't terribly great names for maybe the way we use language today. Maybe it made more sense in the past. But normal goods is what I just described. When your income increases, you buy more of the good. An inferior good is not a good that's shoddy or poor quality or something like that. It's simply the type of good that when your income increases, you buy less of it. When your income decreases, you buy more of it. Now, why in the world would you do such a thing? You might be asking yourself, and you would say, self. It's because these are goods that I'm buying because it's all I can afford. But if I could afford something better, I would. So the cliche examples would be macaroni and cheese or ramen noodles. There's a good one. So you're a poor graduate student. You're trying to just eat and not die. So what money you have, you do spend on ramen noodles. However, once you get an increase in income, you don't go splurge out on ramen noodles. You decrease your demand of ramen noodles and take your money and put it towards the stuff you've really been wanting all along. And that's the idea of inferior goods. So, picture I just drew here would be, as you see, the demand is increasing. This would be because your income increased, and this product that we drew a picture of is a normal good. However, to get this picture with an inferior good, this would actually be a picture of your income decreasing, and therefore I'm buying more of this inferior good because I gotta have something. Okay, last factor to shift demand is the price of a complement. We did substitute to start out. Now we're doing complement. The difference between those two is substitute is something I eat or buy instead of the product of the picture's demand curve that I'm looking at, and complement is something I would buy with it. So since we're doing peanut butter, let's say this is the demand curve that we're looking at right now for peanut butter. Then we did a substitute was Nutella, something I would buy instead of peanut butter. But now we want to talk about a complement. And a complement would be something I eat with peanut butter, which I'm sure you're already racing ahead and thinking, ooh, jelly. Jelly is something I eat with peanut butter. So again, you can imagine that there is a demand curve over here for, let's do that in white, for jelly. Right? And this is not, like if this is a test question, I'm not asking about this market over here for jelly that has some sort of price going on, but it does exist. And so for reasoning it out, you can think about, okay, so the price of jelly, let's have it go down. And we know law of demand, price goes down, I'm buying higher quantity of jelly. The idea with a complement is, what am I going to do with all this jelly if I don't have any peanut butter? If you're someone who wants to have jelly with your peanut butter, then all this extra jelly has increased your need for peanut butter at every price. So now we'd be looking at, say, $6, which used to be, well, okay, let's not do that one. $5, which used to be associated with 4, would now be associated with 6. And $2, which used to be associated with a quantity of 6, is now associated with 8. So at every price, when the complement price goes down, my demand for peanut butter will go up. Okay, so we have seen then the 6 things that will shift demand. You can figure out how to memorize them any way you want. Let me just point out something maybe not too appetizing, but is kind of helpful. Look at this over here where I'm circling. This first letter of this list, S-E-P-T-I-C, septic, as in septic tank. It might be helpful for you to remember. S is substitutes price, E for expected future price. P is population / demographics. So if you're given a question that's not the whole population increasing, but like we did before, the babies or the older people are increasing, that would work with population. Tastes and preferences, income, and complements price. All right, so do practice with these factors a lot. Reason through the things. Do not overthink. Do not get lost. Do not get confused in things like this over here where you're asked about the market for peanut butter, but you're thinking about the market for jelly and na. So just be really careful in the way you're thinking. And I recommend drawing out pictures when you're trying to read out. I mean, like just little sketches. You don't have to show them to anybody. And that might help you avoid mistakes in reasoning these things out.